Good morning. My name is Stephen Switzer, and I'm reading through my novel Hope Starts Small. Today, I'm starting into a new chapter. This is chapter 4, part 1. The name of the chapter is Oma, and the name of the chapter is War Baby. Constance's mother, affectionately called Oma, lived on the first floor of the barn. Soon after the family moved in, they arranged for stairs to be installed between the two floors. The location was a little awkward because the stairs came down right near the center of Oma's living room. But there were few other options, and everyone made the most of it. And of course, it meant easy access for the kids to Oma. To the kids, Oma was a keeper of treasures and delights. They loved to visit her. But their sweet experience of her was the result of a long life, bittersweet and well-aged like a fine wine. Oma had been a German war baby. She was born in 1944 in Bavaria. As a baby, she had been rushed to bomb shelters as the Allies advanced. Her birth father was a medic killed rushing across a bridge to help transfer wounded soldiers. She grew up in Depression-era Germany. She remembers having family that almost starved. She would go with her siblings and pick up manure, taking it to farmers in exchange for money for food. Her mother eventually remarried. Her stepfather was a lovely man who had gladly embraced her and her children as his own. He worked for Siemens and was from Berlin. Precise, orderly. The sort that kept his desk organized with every writing implement in its place. Her mother was not this way. She was more easygoing, comforting, the sort that would paint a mural of flowers on the house for fun and not worry if things didn't turn out just right. But the two of them together created a delightful mix, and this was the home in which Oma grew up. But at the same time, Oma's life had begun under the shadow of the oppressive evil of the Nazis and Hitler. When she was older, she had visited family living on the east side of Berlin. What she saw and felt are the sorts of things that can sour a person and darken their view. But she came to know Jesus as a young adult, and her hope in him was like a campfire that kept her warm even when some nights were very cold. Frank had never visited Germany and hadn't met Constance's relatives there. He had only heard stories from Constance, Oma, and others about their visits. Frank also knew very little about the dark times that Oma experienced when she was young, or when she was older and saw life in East Berlin. But there was one peculiar and long-lasting effect of those times on Oma that he did see. When Frank, Constance, Oma, and the kids were living in the house in town, Frank had a conversation with Oma about the possibility of moving. At the time, she had just started getting settled where they were, unpacking things, putting up treasures on shelves and pictures on the walls. The prospect of moving again so soon for someone in her twilight years could easily have been an overwhelming and impossible prospect. So when Frank brought up the subject with her, it was with some trepidation. He wasn't quite sure what she would think of it. Oma was easygoing and was willing to agree even if something would be painful or difficult for her. But if one listened closely, you could hear over time hints of her real concerns in small comments made later on. And Frank and Constance knew to listen to these like signals and take them to heart. But when Frank described the dream, which at first involved a large plot of land, a blueberry field, a family garden, and goats, Oma was immediately and enthusiastically on board. Her reason was simple. We should grow our own food. There was a dark and determined sensibility behind that statement. Oma had grown up in a context where sometimes there was no food. Frank, Constance, and the kids had never experienced this. And it seemed as if her experience gave Alma a special fervor, a willingness to do what was necessary in order to make it possible for the family to grow at least some of the food they ate. She understood it would not be easy, and certainly throughout the process of considering new homes, it appeared as if each one would have cost her something precious. Perhaps she would not have her own private space, or she would need to use steps to reach her living area, or it might be further from other family and grandchildren. But she took each prospect in stride, graciously, even when things got really bleak and Frank started joking about building an igloo. And while Constance struggled with the prospect of living in the barn in such an awkward space with little room to run, Alma preferred it. The house had a clear separate living area for her, with her own bathroom and kitchen on the first floor. She wouldn't need to use stairs to get to her place, and whenever Frank and Constance mentioned the barn, the signal was clear. I like that place. When the barn was eventually selected and the family began to land there, Alma did her best to help with the move. She packed what she could, carefully nestling her treasures and memories into boxes. And with the determination of Jacob with his eyes set on Egypt and the hope of seeing Joseph's face, so too Alma moved and settled in at the barn with grace and joy, glad to know that they were in a place where they could, in fact, grow their own food. All right, thanks for listening. I hope you have an awesome day.